Hello. We are so excited to introduce our keynote speaker for camp this year, Cameron Kinley. Cameron is a decorated athlete and a visionary author and motivational speaker.
Cameron attended the United States Naval Academy, where he served as the president of his class and the captain of the varsity football team. After graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Political Science, Cameron had the opportunity to fulfill his childhood dream of playing in the NFL.
Initially denied a delayed commission, Cameron received presidential permission to sign as a free agent with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. While Cameron was initially released, he turned this adversity into victory to continue on with his life of service, feeling his passion for empowering others.
Today, the Memphis native continues to serve as an intelligence officer in the United States Navy and is an active mentor throughout his community.
Please give a huge Wildcat welcome to our Focus Camp speaker, Cameron Kinley.
Yeah, I think I got the mic. Is this on? Can you hear me? Is this mic working? Is it working? Cool. All right. Good morning. Come on. Good morning. So this is my second time in Ohio. The first time I came to Ohio was actually in 2018. We were playing football against the University of Cincinnati, and we lost 42-0. So needless to say, it feels good to be back on better terms. This visit is already going a lot better than that game did against Cincinnati. But I'm extremely grateful, extremely honored to have this opportunity today. So thank you to the Hilliard-Falcon staff that has worked for 20 years putting this freshman focus camp together. Thank you for bringing me here. Varsity Brands, BSN Sports, thank you for everything you guys do across the country. To the student leaders, man, that energy, I appreciate it. I know it's not easy to get some freshmen to come in, not be socially awkward a little bit. So I'm curious, what's the loudest color in the room right now, though? Is there I think it might be yellow. Blue? Okay. I think red is a little too cool for school right now. Y'all a little too cool. It's okay. But to the class of 2028, man, welcome home. Welcome to your new home. Welcome to your new beginnings. I know you're probably feeling anxious. You're probably feeling nervous. You're anticipating, what does these next 4 years hold for your life? What are you about to encounter? What are you about to walk into? And honestly, you're about to experience some of the best 4 years of your life. And I truly mean that. High school is a time where you're going to create relationships that can last a lifetime. You're going to create memories that you will remember for the rest of your life. So while you're nervous, be excited. Be thankful for what you're about to experience, because honestly, I would do anything to be back in your shoes right now. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. But unfortunately, while I don't have the ability to go back into time, I fortunately have the ability to reflect. And so as I was preparing my talk today, I wanted to remember some of those same emotions that I felt when I was in your shoes, an incoming freshman going into high school for the first time. And I came across this picture from my freshman year of high school. So this is my freshman football picture. I was probably 5'6", 115 pounds, soaking wet. And everybody said I had no business being on the football field. And looking at that picture, I probably have to agree with them. I certainly wasn't the biggest or the strongest. I wasn't the fastest or the most athletic kid on the team. But what I will say about this version of me is that I had a vision and I had work ethic. I knew that one day I wanted to play in college to make sure that my parents didn't have to pay tuition for me. So I wanted to get a full ride scholarship, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. And so it was also in my freshman year of high school that I got introduced to the phrase, trust the process, by my varsity football coach. So my first year was our first year having a football team, so we were building the program up from scratch. And our high school football coach, he had a vision that one day we'd be champions. He had a vision that one day we'd be successful. But he said it's going to come down to our ability to trust the process. So after every win, after every loss, it was trust the process. The tough days in the weight room, it was trust the process. The conditioning days, the bumps, the bruises, everything was about trusting this process. And we bought into that vision. We put the work in. We trusted in the process. And 4 years later, we would end up going 14-0, winning the state championship my senior year, and I would go on to sign a scholarship to play football at the United States Naval Academy. And so a high school team that struggled to get 20 kids to come out to play football, and a kid that had no business being on a football field his freshman year trusted the process and ended up being victorious. I share that story with you because where you are today is not indicative of where you're capable of being in the future. Where you are today is simply your starting point. What are you going to do with your opportunity? What are you going to do with this new chapter in your life? What decisions are you going to make, and what actions are you going to take to realize some of those dreams, those goals, those aspirations that you might have inside of you? And this journey is not going to be easy, and I offer that you trust the process as you go through these next 4 years of your life in high school. You embrace the good, you embrace the bad, because trusting the process is going to require perspective, it's going to require perseverance, and it's going to require patience. So perspective, the way you view the world is ultimately how you interpret it. The way you view how you do will always determine how you do what you do. The way you view what you do will always determine how you do what you do. And so my freshman year at the Naval Academy, I arrived there, made the travel roster for the football team. There was one thing that was on my mind. We were set to play the University of Memphis Tigers, October 14th, 2017. I still remember the date. Being from Memphis, going back to my hometown, this was going to be a homecoming for me. And I hadn't been home yet since I left the summer to go to basic training, so I had family come to the game, friends, former teammates, former coaches. The stage was set for me to put on a show. And so we go to the Liberty Bowl Memorial Stadium. I got my pump-up music going. I'm jogging around. I see the fans in the crowd, see the sold-out crowd. We're on national television, playing on ESPN. Like, everything's set. The stage is perfect for me to put on a show. I'm going to be real with you. I was lit. I was hyped. I don't know, is lit still cool? Or I'm outdated? It's still cool? Okay. I was lit. I was hyped. I was ready to put on the show. And so the third quarter came around, and I finally got the chance for my first piece of action. And so I jog across the Liberty Bowl Stadium field, smiling cheek to cheek, looking at the crowd, mesmerized, thinking everything's about me, and I line up in front of my guy. And I'm playing on punt return. It's special teams. So as the corner on punt return, my objective is to keep the guy in front of me from having a straight path to our punt returner. The best way to do that would be to protect my inside, make him go outside, take the long route so that he wouldn't be able to get to my guy quickly. And so I line up in front of him. The ball snaps. He gives me a fake to the inside. I go for it. He takes the outside lane, and I'm like, I got him. He did exactly what I wanted him to do. The plan worked to my perfection. But there was one variable that I forgot to account for: the speed of my opponent. And so I kid you not, when this man took the outside lane, I'm going to cut him off, and I'm no longer in the Liberty Bowl Memorial Stadium. I'm no longer on a football field. I feel like I'm in Paris on the Olympic track, because this guy turned into an Olympic gold medal sprinter like Usain Bolt, and I'm running for my life on this football field, chasing after this guy on national TV, feeling all of the weight of embarrassment, all of the weight of disappointment, because the moment that I've been waiting for so long finally came, and I wasn't able to seize the opportunity. The moment came, and it was too big for me. I wasn't ready for it. And so when I got back to school that Monday, I got a text from my position coach saying that he wanted to meet with me in his office. And when I saw the text, to be honest, this is what it felt like. Has your mom or dad, any of them ever called your name and you just knew you were in trouble? Like, full name. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Like, they call your name, you just know you're in trouble. You don't even know what you did. And so my stomach dropped when I read that text. I was like, I feel like my mom just called me by my full government. I'm like, what did I do? And so I get out of class. I go to the coach's office. I meet with him. He brings me in, and at first he's buttering up the biscuit a little bit. He's asking me how school's going. I'm like, school's good, coach. Everything's good. He said, how's your family doing? I'm like, family's good, coach. Just saw him. He's like, that's good. And then finally he says, Cameron, we feel like you have a lot of potential. Now listen, whenever somebody says you have potential, that means they're about to tell you why you're not good enough right now. And so he says, Cameron, we feel like you have a lot of potential, but you're not there yet. He said, you're not fast enough, you're not athletic enough to play the position at this level. He said, we're moving you down the scout team for the rest of the year. And I was devastated. From going from being a high school state champion to holding bags in practice, like, what kind of road to glory is that? And so in my mind, I'm like, you know what? My goal was to get to college, make sure my parents didn't have to pay. I'm here now. There's no reason for me to continue to play the game of football. And so the first thing I did when I got out that meeting was I called my dad. And if any of you have had your parent as a coach, then you know that it's an interesting relationship. My dad coached me my whole life for football. So when I called him and told him that I didn't want to play football anymore, he wasn't trying to hear any of that. He said, Cameron, I understand that you're upset. I understand that you're frustrated, but you're looking at this situation from the wrong perspective. He said, you need to focus on the deficiencies that the coach mentioned and come back ready to compete next season. And I was stubborn at first, but I ultimately knew my dad was right. You know, parents are apparently always right. So I considered it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take his advice. Just because I ran into a little bit of failure, just because I ran into a little bit of adversity, didn't mean it was time to throw in the towel. And so I thought back to some of the things my coach told me, and he said, you know, I wasn't flexible enough, so I need to get more flexible. I wasn't fast enough. I needed to improve my skills a little bit. So the first thing I did was I joined the yoga club at the United States Naval Academy. Now, as you can imagine, I was the only guy that looked like me in that yoga club. And everybody talks about yoga as if it's some real majestic, peaceful Zen type of activity. You know, they talk about tree pose and all that good stuff right there. But I never felt any of that. Like every class was rough. Every class was tough. Like I felt real uncomfortable. But I stayed consistent, and being consistent in an uncomfortable area created room for growth. I paired the yoga class with morning workouts every day before school. 5 a.m., I was in our indoor facility working out, just me in there. And I'm going through drills, and I'm visualizing myself being successful that next year in Navy and Marine Corps Stadium. And I would just keep doing this for months and months and months, thinking about what my dad said, you know, keeping the right perspective of the difficulty. And that next year, I would end up starting my first game, and I would go on to start over 20 games at the United States Naval Academy. But I always think about, you know, what would have happened if my dad would have never changed my perspective of something that I viewed as a failure? Where are you directing your attention in moments of failure and adversity? Are you seeing these moments as an obstacle, or are you seeing them as an opportunity? Listen, failure is not something that you need to be ashamed of. Everybody fails. We all come up short sometimes. It's not what happens to us. It's the way that we respond to it. Just because you fail at something doesn't make you a failure. Failing is an action. It's not an identity. And so as you begin high school, you're going to take some difficult academic courses. Like I remember vividly taking math class and getting introduced to concepts such as geometry, algebra, pre-calc, right? You might struggle with a couple of assignments. You might struggle with a couple projects, a couple tests. You might get a bad grade here and there. But just because you get a bad grade on one assignment doesn't mean that you're not capable of being a great student. It just means that you have more work to do. It just means that you now have an opportunity to improve, an opportunity to grow, to learn, develop. It's only when we get outside of our comfort zone, when we're stretched outside of our comfort zone, that we begin to actually experience growth. So we have to learn how to get comfortable being uncomfortable in the face of failure and adversity if we want to develop in our lives. You know, sometimes, if I can be honest with you, I struggle with our generation. And I'm a Gen Zer just like you guys. I'm 25, so we're all Gen Z. But sometimes I struggle with our generation. I love Gen Z. I think we're one of the best to ever do it. But in the social media society that we live in, it's like we place so much value and emphasis on success. It's like we get on Instagram and we're trying to see who has the most followers, who has the most likes. We get on TikTok, we want to see who has the most views, right? Like we idolize some of these influencers. We idolize some of these famous people because they're always posting their wins. And like there's nothing wrong with aspiring to achieve something in your life. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have goals. I understand you're coming into high school. You want to be popular. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get some influence and some platform. The issue becomes when we start to identify ourselves, we start identifying our values with the achievements that we have in our lives. Because when you place the value of yourself on success, when you only see yourself as somebody when you're successful, then the question becomes, who are you when you're unsuccessful? Who are you when you experience failure? And like I've always wondered, I said, you know, what separates the good from the great? Like what separates the remembered from the forgotten? Like the people that people always speak about and then the ones that people never think about. And while we see their success, we see their wins on social media, honestly, it's a perspective of failure that allows these people to move forward in the face of adversity, that allows them to get to the top of the mountain. They didn't just fall on top of the mountain. Social media is going to show them on top of the mountain, but it's not going to show the climb that it took to get them there. You'll always see what they do, but you'll never see what it took for them to get there. And I went to the same elementary school as a man by the name of Fred Smith. Fred Smith, he graduated many, many years before me, but we went to the same school. And so when I was in the 5th grade, Mr. Smith came and spoke at a father-son luncheon. And he's getting on stage and he's telling us a story about when he was in his Yale business management course and his professor told him to write a paper on a business proposal. And Mr. Smith had this great idea. He said, the world really needs a company that has the ability to deliver packages overnight. Like all over the world, using trucks, vans, airplanes. Like we could really benefit from having a company like that. And he writes this whole paper, he puts his all into it, he puts all his effort into it, and he turns it into his professor. His professor reads the paper, and they go, Mr. Smith, this idea is very bold. It's very ambitious. I don't think it's feasible. I don't think you'll ever be able to make something like this happen. It's not very probable. 10 years later, Mr. Smith held on to that idea, and he founded a company by the name of Federal Express. Some of you may know it as FedEx. Today, that company does over $80 billion in revenue. That C assignment now has that man being a multi-billionaire because he didn't experience failure and see it as the end-all, be-all, but he continued to pursue something that he was passionate about. He kept the right perspective of it. But why should we stop there at Fred Smith? J.K. Rowling, one of the greatest authors of our generation. She went to not one, not two, not three, but 12 publishers. And she was telling them about this little boy that's going to be a wizard and be super powerful, and he's going to defeat the biggest enemy in the world and save his country and save his world, right? Like everybody's familiar with the story. You know who I'm talking about. But 12 publishers said, Harry Potter? Nah, we're good. Nobody's going to be interested in that. And we see how that worked out for J.K. Rowling. But why should we stop there? Walt Disney, his first animation studio went bankrupt. He wasn't successful in his business. And we know he didn't stop. He went on to be a founder of Disney Pixar, which has some of your favorite movies, definitely some of my favorite movies and TV shows to this day. Charles Schulz, when he was in high school, he was an artist. He submitted a comic to his high school yearbook. The high school yearbook rejected it and said it wasn't good enough. Charles Schulz went on to find Peanuts. He went on to create his own comic, Peanuts. That's Charlie Brown, Snoopy. And so while Charles Schulz didn't make it into his high school yearbook, his high school now has a statue of Snoopy in their main lobby. It's like we hear these stories all the time of successful people experiencing these failures and overcoming it. However, for some reason in our lives, when we experience failures ourselves, we think that it means that we're not good enough. We think that it means that this path is not the one that we should take. We think that it means that we need to redirect. We start to question our ability. We start to question our confidence. But at some point, we have to realize that maybe failure is a vital part of the process. It's not so much failure that matters, it's how we fail, how we choose to learn from it. And so as you go through high school and you face those difficulties, whether it's in academics, whether it's in athletics, whether it's in the arts, whether it's with friendships, right? When things don't go your way, you don't need to look at it as if it's a less of a value of you. You don't need to see yourself in a lesser light. You need to think about your perspective of it. What is this situation trying to teach me? What can I learn from it? Because it's when we develop this perspective of failure that allows us to persevere forward in the face of adversity, which brings me to my next point, perseverance. And so heading into my senior year at the Naval Academy, I had a lot of high expectations for myself. My team had just elected me to be team captain. I was named a finalist for the academic Heisman. Everything was being set up perfectly for me to end my career on a high note, 17-year football journey. About midway through the season, we were sitting at 3-2, not bad, not horrible, kind of decent. I felt like I was playing some solid football, had some good moments every now and then, bad moments, Felt like I was playing decent, though. We were going into the game against Houston. My coach called me into his office again. This is a different coach, though, not the same coach from my freshman year, different coach. We talked all the time. This is during COVID-19, so he would always check to see how the people were doing, to get a pulse on the guys. And so he brings me into his office, and we're talking. He's asking me how the guys are doing. He asked me where my headspace is. And then we're talking for about 30, 40 minutes. I'm like, all right, coach, I got to go back to class. As I'm walking out of his office, he goes, hold on, Cameron, one more thing. We're going to go with somebody else this week. And I'm like, okay, cool, coach. I play corner. There's two of us on the field. I said, who are you putting on the other side? He said, no, we're not playing you this week. We're going to give somebody else an opportunity. And for me, that was tough because I'm like, man, I'm the team captain. How am I going to lead people when I'm not in the position to lead? Like when things aren't going in my favor, how am I going to be there for other people? I felt like I was going to lose some respect being on the sideline. And the rest of that season, every week that came by, I saw myself getting less and less of playing time. And all I could think about was like, man, 17 years, man, I started playing football at the age of 5. Here's this journey coming to an end. I was still there for my teammates. I'm still cheering them on. I'm helping the people that they put in front of me. But in the reality of it, the truth is that was hard for me because I knew that my season was coming to an end. I knew that this is not how I scripted it. And we finally get to the last game of the season, Army-Navy, the biggest rivalry in college football. I know you Ohio State fans are probably going to disagree with that, but Army-Navy, biggest rivalry in college football, right? Like sold-out crowd, midshipmen, cadets, president coming to the game, jets flying over. It's the greatest atmosphere in the world. And that game rolls around, and it's a little different for me. I go out to the coin toss. President's at the game. I go off to the coin toss. All the excitement's building. But in reality, I know, man, I'm probably not going to see the field this game. And I go off that, after I get off the field on that coin toss, I don't see the field again till the fourth quarter. My coach subs me in with 2 minutes left in the game. At this point, Army has 13, we have 0. All Army's doing at this point is taking knees to run the clock out. And I'm sitting there on the field, and I'm watching the clock tick. And every second that goes down, I'm seeing the last seconds of my football career fading away. To everybody else in the stadium, it's signifying that the end of the game is coming, and Army's about to beat us for the third time in 4 years. But as I'm watching 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, I knew it was over for me. And I went emotionally numb. And I remember vividly walking across that field, not really paying attention to what was going on around me. Not really feeling, the fact that Army just won, not really paying attention to a fight that's breaking out. All I'm thinking about was, man, 17 years, just like that. 17 years of sacrifice, 17 years of dedication, 17 years of keeping the perspective and trying to overcome. Everything's coming to an end, just like that. In reality, I knew that it didn't have to be over. There was always the potential of going to the NFL. But they say less than 2% of athletes that play college football go to the NFL. And I knew for sure that no NFL scout was going to want a guy that didn't play half of the season, that rode the bench. Has anybody ever been in this position before? You have a dream. You have an aspiration inside of you. It's burning up inside of you. You know that there's something that you want to achieve. There's something that you want to go after. But you have this voice in your head that's louder than the dream. The voice telling you why you can't do it. The voice telling you what other people are going to say about you if you don't do it. It's the voice of your insecurities. We all have them. Insecurities don't make you weak, right? Like we all have these feelings of self-doubt. We all have these feelings of fear, right? It's natural, especially when we're surrounded by different people. We can see what they're doing in their lives, and we feel like we're not doing enough. We don't know if we're good enough to make it happen. But when you find yourself in these moments of insecurity, when you find yourself in these moments of doubt, it's important that you find the people that you have closest to you who might just believe in you more than you believe in yourself. Because when you go to them, it might be your brother, it might be a sister, best friends, parents, whoever it is. When you go for them, it's able to bring you out of your own head so that you can find that confidence to act in spite of fear. Because it's not elimination of fear that we're after. We all feel fear, but it's building that confidence to overcome and act in spite of. And so for me, that was my little brother and my dad. And so when I got home that Christmas, I was working out in the garage with my little brother and my dad, and I said, you know what? What do y'all think about me trying to go to the NFL? And my dad said, you never want to live with the regret of not trying and wondering for the rest of your life what would have happened if I did. And in that moment, I knew that if I gave it everything I had, if I gave it all the sacrifice, all the effort, all the discipline, that I would be able to look back on the journey and be thankful regardless of whatever would happen. I knew that the price of regret was going to be a lot heavier than the price of discipline. And so I decided to declare for the NFL draft and started pursuing after this dream. But I must remind you that this is COVID-19 at the time. The United States Naval Academy were shut down. There's no really ability for us to get out. Our facilities are shut down. And so when kids train for their pro day, they typically fly to like Florida, Texas, California, and they train at these top-notch facilities. But with me not being able to go anywhere and our facilities on campus being shut down, I was preparing for my pro day in the abandoned track shed that I found on campus. And I'm not going to sit here and lie to you as if every day I felt motivated. Like I can't sit here and lie to you as if every day I felt like it was going to work out for me. Like every single day I had that thought in my head of like, man, is this in vain? I don't even have a pro day scheduled. I haven't even talked to an NFL scout. Like, is this really going to be worth it? Putting in all this effort, putting in all this discipline. I got former coaches talking about me, teammates talking about me, asking what I'm doing. I'm like, is this really going to be worth it? But at the end of the day, all I knew was that I had to control what I could control. I couldn't worry about the outside variables. I had to think about the opportunity that I had in front of me, and I had to maximize the 24 hours that I had. And I had to be consistent in spite of the circumstances. I had to move forward in spite of the circumstances. And so I continued to battle. I continued to push. I continued to rely on the people that I had with me instead of focusing on the things that were stacked up against me. And on May 1st, 2021, I got a call from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers saying that they wanted to sign me as an undrafted free agent. But to me, that moment was so much bigger than making it to the NFL. It was so much bigger than that. To me, that moment was acting in spite of fear, overcoming that hurdle of doubt, overcoming those hurdles of insecurity, putting that faith over the fear that I had, being consistent in spite of, persevering through the trials, right? Because the circumstances are not always going to be in your favor. You never control your circumstances. You can only control how you act in spite of it. It's like persevering, right? Like every single day, all you can focus on is the moment that you have. You can't look too far down the road. You can't be fixated on the past. You got to see the opportunity that you have in front of you. When you walk into this school every single day, all you have is the 24 hours that you have, right? Like you can't be concerned about whether your friends or whether your classmates are going to come to school with the right attitude. You don't have any control of that. You can choose to be the light. You always have control over your effort, your attitude, and your actions. Your effort, attitude, and actions, you always have those under your control. So when everybody else may be acting in darkness, you can choose to be the light. You can choose to persevere. So when you see them messing with the kid because they think that it's cool and they're trying to be popular, you can be the one to persevere and stand up for that kid. Because I tell you what, it's hard to be the guy that stands up for somebody because you're going to be looked at as lame. It's hard to be that guy to stick up for somebody. But it's a lot harder to live knowing that you could have stuck up for somebody. You got to understand, man, being popular is not worth the emotions of other people, right? Like when you're trying to be popular, but you're bringing somebody else down, you got to have a look in the mirror and be like, man, what am I really doing? Is this really the cool thing to do? Like, don't let those social pressures, that temptation overtake you. Like as you come into high school, you're going to be faced with so many peer pressures. It might be academics, right? Some of your friends are going to want to study. Some of them aren't. Right? That's peer pressure. It might be some extracurricular stuff that you know your parents don't want you doing, right? You have to ask yourself, does this align with where I want to go? Does it align with the values that I stand for? You have to persevere in spite of those tough times. It's not easy, but it's worth it. Because if you don't grow weary in doing what's good in proper time, you're going to reap the harvest. And perseverance allows you to continue to move forward in the process, which brings me to patience. And so after signing that contract, I went down to Tampa and was getting ready to fly back. I went down to Tampa for rookie mini camp, spent a couple weeks down there, and then flew back to the Naval Academy for graduation. You couldn't paint a better picture of my life at this point. I was playing in the NFL. I was going back to graduation as class president. I was giving a speech and presenting Vice President Kamala Harris with a gift. Like I'm living on cloud 9. But that week when I get back to Annapolis, Maryland, I get an email from our commandant of midshipmen saying that they want to meet with me. And the commandant, that would be like the principal texting you saying that he wanted to meet with you in his office first thing in the morning. Like, you're probably not going to think that's a good thing. And so I get that email. I tell him, okay, it sounds good. He says we're going to meet in the top floor of Hopper Hall. It's our newest building on the academy. We're going to meet in this conference room that overlooks the water. And so that next day I get up, I go to the conference room, take the elevator up, I walk into the room, big conference table there. I have my representation with me. I sit down at the long table and I wait for him to come in from the patio. The Blue Angels are flying that day. So everybody's out on the patio. They have a little social gathering. People are smiling. Everybody's happy. We wait for him to come in. He finally comes in and sits down. When he sits down, he gets straight to the point. He looks at me. He says, Cameron, I called you into this meeting because the Secretary of the Navy has declined your package. I'm not going to let you go play in the NFL. You're going to commission with your classmates. And I remember sitting there speechless. Like, just like that? And when I finally got the words to muster up, I asked him, I said, is there any way to appeal this? He said, no. I said, did he give you a reason for it? He said, no. And to just give you some background, everybody that goes to the service academies, they have a 5-year service commitment. So they're going to serve in the military 5 years after. But there's a policy to where if you have a professional sports opportunity, then they're going to allow you to go delay your commissioning so that you can play and serve on the back end. I already had some teammates that had done it before in the past, and even the same year I was coming out, there was 3 other guys from the Air Force Academy, 1 guy from the West Point Academy that were doing the exact same thing that I wanted to do. And so when I got out that meeting, I texted them. I said, hey, man, I just talked to my commandant. Like, he told me I wasn't going to be able to do it. Did y'all hear the same thing? And they said no. And at that point, I knew I was in a difficult situation. I couldn't figure out why those 4 got approved and I was the only one that got denied, but I also knew that I was dealing with the military, and so I had to play my cards right. I wasn't trying to make anybody upset. And so we went a couple weeks trying to work things out behind the scenes. I told my agent, we're not going to put anything out this week. I want the focus to stay on graduation. I don't want any extra attention. But then we put out a statement. The day I was supposed to report the minicamp, we put out a statement saying that I had been denied by the Navy, and the thing just blew up. And this is still COVID during this time, so I'm doing interviews on Zoom. And so it starts off doing local interviews with local news channels. I'm sitting at my house, and I'm doing this. I'm just telling them my story. I'm telling them what happened. I'm telling them what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm not trying to get out of my service commitment. I'm just trying to do the same thing that these other guys are doing, trying to pursue this childhood dream. And we go from local interviews. It starts getting more attention. And I start doing interviews on CNN, Fox, Good Morning America, ESPN, NFL Network. And at first, I'm not going to lie, it seems kind of cool, right? Like, everybody's talking about your story. You're getting the recognition. But with recognition also comes a lot of opinions. And so as the story gets bigger, I start getting these messages on Instagram, these messages on Twitter, people calling me selfish, people saying that I took somebody else's spot, people saying I just need to shut up and serve. Like, everybody's saying these different things about me, even though I'm standing in front of the camera saying it clearly what I'm trying to do. They're misconstruing my story, and it begins to weigh on me a little bit. And I start to struggle with my mental health as I'm going through this cycle, and I tell my mom, I said, you know what? I don't even care anymore. I said, I'm tired of being the bigger person. I'm tired of getting in front of this camera acting as if everything's okay. I said, next interview, I don't care if it's the local newspaper. I don't care if it's the biggest network there is. I'm telling them how I really feel. And I'm bringing up all these tweets and messages, and I'm calling all these people out. And my mom said, okay. I was like, hold on, Mom. Like, you're not supposed to let me do something like that. Like, and she said, Cameron, she said, everybody would be able to be okay when things are going right. Right? Like, when you're on that plane going from from Florida back to Maryland, living on cloud 9, like, everybody's going to be happy. Right? Everybody's good when everything's on their side. The rising tide floats all boats. But she said, it's in these moments right here where your true character is going to get revealed. The issue is you're thinking about your situation for yourself. You're not thinking about the opportunity that you have to be a positive light for other people when things aren't going their way. She said you need to process your emotions. Your emotions are valid. You're entitled to feel what you feel, but you need to process what you're going through and not react out of your emotions. And it makes me think of the quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where he says, the true measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience. The true measure of a man is where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. Like, that's when your character is going to be revealed, when times get difficult. Everybody's able to do the right thing when it's the easy thing, right? Like, it's easy to be a good friend when you know your friend's going to be a good friend back, right? Like, it's easy to do the schoolwork when you got a cool teacher and you know that they're going to give you a good grade regardless. But when times get tough, right, when you got to put in a little bit of extra work, right, when it is taking a little bit more to be a good friend that day, when it is hard to be a good sibling to your little brother or little sister because you had a long day in high school. Like, it's in those moments where your emotions are being put to test that your true character is going to be revealed. And as you go through high school, your body's developing, right? It's the word we all laugh about, puberty, right? You're going to go through puberty. That means your emotions are also developing. And as your emotions develop, you're going to have some mood swings, right? You have to take the time to process your emotions. It's called emotional intelligence. And so during that time, after that conversation with my mom, I started to journal, right? I started to meditate. I started to get closer in my faith because we have to find these outlets to deal with our emotions so that we don't react out of our emotions. We want to process our emotions, understand them, but at the end of the day, we want to continue to act on our values. And so I continued to be patient, right? I continued to sit still in the midst of a storm. And on June 6th, I got a call from the Secretary of Defense telling me that Joe Biden had made the scenario turn around in my favor and that I'll be able to go back down there to Tampa Bay and compete for a spot on the roster. And I tell you that because in life, sometimes you can do everything you can in your power. You can control what you can control. You can do everything under your power, control the effort, maintain the perspective, right? Persevere. But there can still be things that are outside of your control that affect the predicament that you're in, that can affect your circumstances, right? Like, you don't have control over how much homework or assignments that the teacher is going to give you, right? Like, you don't have control over those things, right? Like, when you're struggling academically and you're still getting all this workload and you start to get frustrated, you start to get angry, you start to get upset, you start to feel like you just want to give up and throw in the towel, sometimes you just have to sit still and be patient. Sometimes you just have to process your emotions. because in the end, it can still work out in your favor. And so after receiving the reversal, I was back down there in Tampa Bay in training camp fighting for my spot on the roster. I'm sitting next to Tom Brady every morning in team meetings. I'm competing against Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski. Like, I'm finally living this childhood dream that I once imagined. Everything's finally going well again. And the moment comes for our first preseason game against the Cincinnati Bengals, actually. And I think about it, man. I was in the locker room before that game, and I'm looking at the jersey. And I go, man, me and my brothers, we used to create ourselves on Madden. Like, we used to dream of these moments. Like, this little kid right here, 5 years old, like, he used to see that stuff on TV and want to be, I said, that wants to be me one day, right? Like, I had this childhood dream, and here it is, finally coming to reality. Here's trusting the process, finally working out in my favor. And the game comes, and I play pretty well. I finished the game with 6 tackles, the most on the second most on the team. Don't give up any big plays. Everything's feeling good. I'm feeling like everything's set for me to finally have this realization, finally get to realize this $2.4 million 3-year contract, like my life's on cloud 9 again. That next morning, my parents came down to the game. I take my parents to the airport. I kiss them goodbye, and I tell them I'll see you next week. We're set to play the Titans next week. I said, I'll see you next week when we play the Titans. I drop them off. I'm going back to the team hotel. As I'm driving down the highway in Tampa, I get a phone call from the Buccaneers organization. And I'm like, man, it's Sunday. This is our off day. This is kind of weird. I answer the phone call. I say, hello. They say, hey, what's going on, Cameron? What are you up to? I said, not much, man. Just dropped my parents off at the airport. Now I'm headed back to the team hotel. Probably going to get a little bit of sleep, watch some film. They said, well, there won't be a need for you to do any of that. We've decided to release you today. You'll no longer be a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. And I just remember sitting there in my truck, less than 24 hours after being on top of the world, living a childhood dream, everything crumbling down. And I hang up the phone, I turn my stuff in, I get in my truck, and I drive back 12 hours to Memphis that day. And the whole drive home back to Memphis, I'm asking myself, I said, man, what's the point? I said, what's the point of keeping the right perspective? What's the point of persevering through the hard times? What's the point of being patient even when things don't go your way if it's just going to end up with me like this? On top of that, all the interviews that I did beforehand, all those same stations had to follow up with the story. And so I'm seeing this blasted everywhere. I'm getting notifications on my phone saying I've been cut. I'm seeing these tweets, these Instagram posts, right? The hardest part about that was when I was going through the situation before and everybody was being supportive, I couldn't keep up with how many people were reaching out to me. When I got cut and the same thing was happening, I could count on one hand how many people I had with me. I felt empty. I felt disappointed. I felt like a failure. I felt like I let everybody down, and it started to weigh on me so heavy that I sent myself into isolation. I sent myself into a depression. And the only place that you could find me if I wasn't at home in my room was at my grandparents' house. That's the only other place that I kind of felt a sense of myself. And I would be there and I would play chess with my granddad, and we would just talk, reflect on life, and he'll kind of boost my spirit. And there was one day I was over at my grandparents' house. I got a phone call from a mentor of mine, and she called me. She said, hey, are you in town? I wanted to say no, but I said, yes, I am. I'm at my grandparents' house. She said, I want you to come speak to my kids at my school. I think they can benefit from hearing your story. And I told her, I said, I'm not that NFL player anymore. Like, I got released. Like, I'm a failure by all intents and purposes. Like, they don't need to hear from me. I'm not your guy. And she said, no, this is exactly why I want them to hear from you right now in the position that you're in. And my mentor, she works with a school in Memphis. It's an alternative school. So the kids that are a part of her program have actually been involved with the juvenile court system. So they made some rough decisions. They've done some things that they probably shouldn't have done, but she helps them transition back into society. And so as I'm driving over to the school, I'm getting goosebumps and butterflies in my stomach. I'm feeling the same way I used to feel when I was in the locker room before the games. I'm feeling nervous. And I hadn't really spoken in front of people like that. I did interviews and stuff, but this was my first time speaking in front of a group of kids. So I'm like, man, this is weird. And I get inside the room, and I walk inside the classroom, and I see these faces of these young men, and I can see the hope in their eyes. It wasn't what I was expecting. I'm like, man, if I was in their shoes, there's no way that I'd be happy to be where I was. But as I shared my story with them, and I started hearing about their story, what I realized is they knew that they messed up in the past. They knew they had made some decisions. They knew they had made some mistakes in the past, but they wanted to know that just because that's where they were, it wasn't indicative of where they were capable of going in the future. They wanted to know that there was still some value in those mistakes that they made. And I shared with them what I went through, and I shared with them how tough it is being at the highest moment, going to the lowest, going back to the highest, going back to the lowest. And it wasn't until I was driving away from that school, I was driving in the car, and I was reflecting on what just happened, that I had one of the biggest realizations of my life. I said, you know what? Maybe the value is in the journey and not the destination. Like maybe the value is in the journey of life and the things that we go through rather than where we ultimately arrive. Like I had it so messed up. I saw my value in life being as a football player. And so when I went through this transformation, went through trusting the process, and I ended up in the NFL, that's where I placed all my value. That's where I placed all my stock. Like that's what I experienced in high school. I trusted the process, ended up being a state champion, ended up playing Division I football. I thought that's what it was about. I had my value in the position of being an NFL player. My value in the position of being a football player. And because that's where my value was, when I lost the game of football, I lost myself. But I had to realize the value of life, it isn't in position, it's in a purpose. And not only is it in a purpose, it's in a purpose that's so much greater than you. And so sometimes even in our toughest situations, we have to look outward to discover what we have inward. And I said, man, that's what the process is worth. That's what persevering is worth. That's what having the right perspective, being patient is worth. It's not so that we can get some selfish gain. It's so that we can discover a purpose that's so much greater than us. And so as you begin this journey, this new chapter of your life, this new beginning of high school, you got 4 years, right? 4 years of opportunity to build relationships, 4 years of creating memories, right? 4 years of trusting the process. You're going to have some good days. You're going to have some bad days. You're going to have a lot of success, some achievements. There's going to be times where you fail, right? As you go through this journey and you learn how to trust the process, you must never forget that you have a purpose on your life that's much greater than you. You have a purpose that has the ability to leave a positive impact in the lives of others. And like I always tell people, I said, man, look, the trophies in the trophy case, they're going to collect some dust over the years. Like the medals you might get for an honor society or for a track meet or whatever that is, that medal's going to rust. The certificates that you might get for being the top of your class, like you're going to lose that certificate. But the one thing that you always have with you, no matter where you go, are the memories that you make with one another. You're never going to forget that. You're always going to remember those memories, and you're always going to remember how you made each other feel. And so as you begin this new venture, you begin this new journey, the anxious emotions that you have, the nervous emotions that you have, my challenge to you is to trust the process. Embrace the good, embrace the bad, but most importantly, live your life for the person to your left and to your right, not for yourself, because that's where you're going to find the value. Thank you.